Hey everyone, I am Kari the Mortician. So our video today was actually a request from one of you viewers, and I'd never even thought of doing this video, but somebody asked, where did my beginning come from? Who was my sponsor? Who taught me to embalm those first couple embalmings and helped me learn the way of being a funeral director and really contributed to who I am as Kari the Mortician. So took a little road trip, traveled down to visit my friend Chris, who is my sponsor back in the day, and we'll get a little insight from him on who Kari was back in the beginning of her career as an apprentice, and as an early embalmer and funeral director. All right, guys, so this is the man. Chris was my sponsor back in 1999 and 2000-ish before I went off to school. So how long had you been licensed at that point?
At that point, I got my license in 1984. So it would have been about 15, 16 years at that point.
So you had a good under your belt. You heard that right. You had just come on board. What year did you start?
1990 summer.
So
yep.
He had been there. I was off at college, not more Troy school, but I was going to college for a psychology degree, and then decided I was going to try this. And so I had known you for about a year, and it was mostly like weekend and summer. I had been home, I think, and had been working with you a little bit. And then I came to be an apprentice. Do you remember, like, what do you remember at all about that time?
We're going back a couple years, Kari.
A few years, guys.
I always remember, always enjoyed working with you. You were always curious. But I think I remember the most, maybe it's because that's an area I really enjoy working in the prep room. And I remember working in the prep room with embalming and cosmetics and working with you on some of those issues.
That's what I was trying to, before shooting the video, Chris, like, did we do a lot of arranging? I think a lot of maybe more rudimentary for you, or don't maybe part as much some of that behind the scenes.
I remember you sitting in.
I did.
You would help with things and go to the office and get things and so forth. But yeah, you would sit on arrangements, and of course we work on funeral services together, and so. And
I remember, I mean, you started where I remember you cutting the cord, kind of, where you're like, okay, you're going to do this one kind of on your own. I'll be here. And it was like, you're going to let me do what? But you really had a good give and take and let me do some things. I know a lot of apprentices have really bad experiences. They don't get opportunities, but you trained and then you kind of released. So that I could.
Well, and I remember what it was like when I served my apprenticeship. You know, I especially in the embalming room, the prep room. You know, I was given some training, but I was also them to try and so forth. And you know, a lot of with embalming and working in the preparation room, it's you just got to do it. And, a little nervous when you let a young person, not a lot of experience, just do their thing. But
you trusted
I
me.
don't recall having any huge disasters.
No, I don't think I messed up too badly. Now I remember one thing I've talked about. I've told people in videos, and I kind of laugh at myself being in the prep room because it was often. I mean, we were in there together. You could go on both sides of the table. So I'd be on one side of the table, you'd be on the other. Sometimes you'd let me mix, or you would really gave me time to get each area. And I remember the doctor came in at one point. So all three of us are in the prep room. Hair and embalming, down and everything. And I don't remember if there was a backflow of fluid, but or I dumped fluid all over the gloves. Washed my gloves off, which would seem difficult. I took them off and threw them away and put a new pair on. And I remember the owner of the funeral home looking at me and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, there was too much fluid. It was bad. You know, it's going to eat through the gloves. It's going to do whatever. And he's like, you do know you can wash them off. And it was just, I think it was nervousness.
Sure.
Being around you
Sure.
with me in there, but then having the owner come in, and it was like, I just got all flustered.
Oh,
And
that's cute. I don't remember that. That's a cute story.
But I remember little moments like that with some things, or
Sure.
just being, I think there's a lot of downtime, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is downtime, where we're kind of, you know, a slow day, or we're mowing the yard, or we're kind of just waiting in between, and we're eating lunch.
Coffee breaks longer than
Yeah.
normal, but it all can be made up for working day and night for
Yeah.
a week at a time.
Well, and we were
happens.
talking some of the busiest years, that funeral home, which neither of us work at that funeral home anymore, but the busiest years were the years we were actually there.
Correct. Yeah.
Doing my apprenticeship, and then while you were there. And it is long, long, long days and hours and families, and we had bodies everywhere, literally at some points, just because it was so busy. Do you recall, there's one family that taught me a lot, and I don't know if you'll recall this. The gentleman had died and had had some animal activity while he had been in the water, had eaten part of his face. Situation interact, and your temperament is so even. I've never seen you get mad, ever. I don't think. I'll have to talk to you.
Well, that's great if you.
But I mean, you're so
It can
even.
happen.
So watching you with families kind of just approach things without the fear that I had, I feel like, taught me so much about approaching some of those situations. Because if they smell fear on you, I feel like it gives them room for fear.
Right.
But you were so calm. This is how it is, and this is what we're gonna do, and this is, and that's kind of how you approached things. But do you remember?
And that, it's interesting you bring that up, and you're talking about, you served your apprenticeship under me. I'm going back, not somebody I served my apprenticeship under, but there's been something that was said to me by an owner of a funeral home that in my early years, and I still remember, I can remember him saying it to me, and it always left this huge impression with me. He said, Chris, no matter how busy you are, try to never look like you are in a hurry in front of the family.
It's so good.
And I think some of that comes back to that trying to, even though you may be trying to talk about a very difficult subject, try to be relaxed. Try to just not look like you are in a hurry. And that has always left a huge impression. It's one little sentence that was said to me, but it's just always stuck with me.
I think that's the big thing with apprenticeships and with learning under people is those little nuggets.
Because you'll pick those up from all the different people you work
Right.
with, not just like your sponsor for your apprenticeship. All those little things, if you're open to the learning and
Well, and I would say
picking
you learn
things up.
good and bad. You make
Exactly.
a bad habit or a bad thing that people do, and you are conscious of not doing that.
Sure.
I think the rest of your career as well, like being rushed or, kind of the opposite of what maybe you were taught, which is good. And I know funeral directors who they answer the phone, I overhear them answering the phone, blah, 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 funeral home. Like they sound like they just ran through to grab the phone because they're in such a hurry. But that makes the customer feel like they're in imposition because you were in the middle of something more important. So good to. What other can you think back to any specifics, any families, anything specific with me?
That's a lot of families.
I know,
Going back,
it's a
I've worked
long
with a
time.
lot of families since I was there. And again, I remember, I think a little bit more remembering working with you in the prep room. And I think I always had this issue with making sure that the bodies were clean. I really like them to be nice and clean when you're all done, and the table be clean and so forth. And sometimes with younger people, it's like, okay, just do this, that, forth. It's no different than how
I think, again, that's what I should be telling you, maybe do what you're going to do next. Cleanliness and some of that you don't get as good, or even with instruments, picking up after yourself and looking around at splatter. You don't even realize it's happening, but if a drop of blood hits water even, that water then will project it out. And so even if you don't even think it has splattered, you get like blood across the room and you're like,
where did that come from?
How did that happen? Do you think it
yeah.
was, you were throwing things and it just projects for some reason. So learning some of that is humbling, because you don't want to ever be told that you're not doing something right, or you're messy, and you get defensive, I think, as a young person sometimes, or take it really personally, or...
I'm having a recollection, but you may tell me if I'm wrong, that when we were extremely busy and you had been there for a fairly long period of time, I think we got so busy, I think there were a couple of times I actually let you actually make the arrangements for the family, because we were so busy. And I remember, I think things from what I recall, everything went very smoothly and fine, and other than maybe a few questions and so forth, but families were very happy.
Well, even with an apprenticeship, and I've learned this, or as an apprentice too, and I've learned this with apprentices, you do get that nervous feeling when you're being watched by your sponsor the whole time. And so as I've had apprentices, if I know, oh, hey, I'll be there in 15 minutes, if it's like a middle of the night call or something, go ahead and start getting out things, set out the fluid you'd want to set out, start putting in eye caps, set features, I'll be there in 15 minutes. But you used to do that with me, and I honestly didn't think about that until right now, because it gave me time where I felt like nobody was watching me to get things ready and to kind of feel like I was taking ownership, but I wasn't really doing anything I could mess up at the point. But you used to do that with me. You'd have me go in the prep room. I'll be in there in 30 minutes. You go ahead and get yourself situated, get your things. And I completely never even thought about that until now. But that's what I do with the apprentices I've had. I have done that.
Sure.
And they've been so thankful. And I get there and they're like, how did I do? Have I got everything? And it does give them some ownership of what they're doing without being watched the whole time.
Yeah, there's nothing sometimes that somebody looking over your shoulder all the time can be tough.
Yeah.
It's really nerve-wracking.
Agreed.
It's really nerve-wracking.
Still, it is nerve-wracking.
Yeah. And just, so, yeah, just to be able to be in there by yourself and not have somebody looking over you, can come in and say, well, you forgot this, you got that. Oh, great. It's all part of the learning process.
Well, and I think back fondly. I know everybody as an apprentice doesn't think back fondly on that whole beginning process, because maybe you didn't work with somebody who was great. I have fond memories because back, those are all my firsts. My first this, my first this kind of call or that kind of call. And all those big firsts are big hurdles and things that you have to go through, and having somebody there that's supportive of you while you're going through it is so crucial, because it is an emotional and a weird, seeing some things for the first time, car accidents, suicides. I remember back very clearly to the first person that was murdered and raped, this girl we had, and I could tell you what casket she had, what color her nails were. Like, those things get burned in. Like, do you remember back when you were an apprentice and some of those big firsts?
Yeah, there's some, again, we're going way back, but we're going back almost 40 years. But yeah, I do. Some of those first. And I served my apprenticeship in a very busy funeral home. So, we saw all kinds of situations as far as the different kinds of causes of death and so forth, and all kinds of different families you're working with. And but I could still remember back to there's certain things that really stick out in your mind. Like I can still remember a couple that were killed in a car accident, a husband and wife. I could still almost to this day picture who they were. And I mean, it's been years ago. And,
Yeah.
you know, I can think of, I think the first time I was involved with a case where it was a suicide, and it was just, you know, it's just, they leave impressions with you. You don't forget.
I think you have to every time you have one of those big firsts, you retrain your brain almost, how you think about life and death, and reteaching yourself how to process. If I see a person in this condition, I talk about this with people who don't work around funeral homes and wonder if they can work around the deceased, that you're trained that if somebody's bleeding, they're hurting, and you have to retrain your brain that they're hurting. If somebody's has a hole in their head, they're still not hurting, or, you know, they're not feeling whatever they felt in that moment, and retraining a lot of how you think about the world that up to that point when you start seeing all those things. And that's, I feel like, what a lot of that apprenticeship time, you're just retraining yourself to think in a different way and to process things in a different way, and not feel hurt and sadness through all of those things you see.
Yeah, I can still remember the first time I ever saw a body after there'd been an autopsy.
Oh, yeah.
That's really, that takes you a while to get used to.
Yeah.
You know, when you have to prepare a body that's somebody that's been through an autopsy and so forth, and yeah, just a lot of firsts that.
I remember my first embalming, and I didn't know. It was before I knew I was going to go to school, and for sure, and they allowed me to kind of watch. And when she went to aspirate, I was like, whoa, what is that, and what are you doing? Because nobody had talked about that. I had worked around a funeral home forever. Nobody talked about it. You guys went in,
Yeah.
because when I was younger, you know, everybody was there working, and they'd go in the prep room, the embalmers, and then they'd come out. I had no idea really what happened in there until they started letting me, you know, right before I went to school and stuff. And I was like, wow, you guys do a lot. You do a lot in here. That was also when autopsies used to be done at the funeral
Yes,
home.
that was really common back in the 80s, and even the 90s in some areas. That was still common that they would be done in the funeral home.
Yeah.
So yeah, you saw a lot of things that probably today folks that work in funeral service wouldn't see, but it's
Yeah.
really different when you actually are there where the autopsies are actually being done.
Yeah.
And
That's interesting. What, I'm trying to think of another question. Do you remember any specifics, anything about young Kari? People want to know probably about young Kari. Anything?
Young Kari. Young Kari, well, she was always really curious. She was really good with people.
Yeah.
I always recall that, really good with people, you know, and that's a real gift. You know, I think I always say that there's two things in our work that you really have to do well. And number one is you need to deal with details. You got to be able to deal with details. But number two, you just have to be nice to people.
Yeah.
Those are two of the big things. You just have to be nice to people. And you know what? Not everybody's gifted with those things.
There's skills you can teach.
But you certainly are. There's skills you can teach, but there's some things you just have to possess those God-given traits and talents and so forth. And but I always remember you're always a joy to work with.
Well, and you weren't
But always curious.
Yeah. And I never saw that curiosity. My mom talks about that.
Oh, really?
About how curious I was. I remember when the owner of the funeral home asked me if I wanted to come in and look at somebody they were already set up in the chapel that had been shot in the head. And I thought, I don't know that I do. And I walked in and I saw the man, and I was like, well, where was he shot? And I remember, I feel like that was one of those moments that I didn't realize what it was putting in me, but it was like, whoa, he was shot in the head, and I don't see that looking at him. Like, you the family can see him after such a trauma. And that was that was really probably a key moment along the path that, and I just remember back to that, but I don't remember it as being curious. But now looking back, I can see I would have never pointed it out except for, I think, probing by viewers when they asked me questions about some of those firsts. And I don't remember the curiosity. I just remember working at I was just there, and I just worked, and I just did my thing, and I set up chairs, and I broke down chairs, and I don't remember the curiosity per se.
A lot of furniture moving we
Oh
do
my
in our work.
We used to have to haul chairs. We would set up the chapel and then break it down into visitation style, and the chairs all had to go upstairs.
They were stored upstairs. Yeah,
and we didn't fold them.
No,
We stacked them, so you would carry 2 chairs stacked, seat to seat.
because they would hold up better long term, I believe is why
Yes.
we didn't always fold
Right.
them. Yes.
And
Up
those
and
chairs
down,
last
2 at a
forever.
time.
Yes.
You took
It
a
was my
long time to
cardio.
set up
And it was
for a
not
funeral.
just up a few stairs. It was up I think 9 stairs, and then up another 6 or 7. And then you turn around, you'd run back down, and you'd grab another set, and you'd go back. It was my cardio back in high school and stuff. That was good training.
Yeah.
I don't know how. That was long nights, and families would leave at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then we would do the chair hauling late at night.
It'd be 11 o'clock for you to actually walk out of the funeral home a lot of nights.
Yeah, so as a high schooler, I would then have to turn all the lights off, take all the garbage out after you set up all the chairs, and then drive home. It was like a 30-minute drive for me to get home, go to bed, and then get up and go to school, and then...
But it's always better, I've learned, to be all set up the night before, because you have no idea what's going to happen during the night.
No, you could get 5 calls and be embalming up until service. Yeah.
So,
You just never know.
so it's always best to have that done. But yeah, that was an unusual aspect at the funeral home, was taking
Those
the chairs
chairs.
up and down the stairs.
Oh, that was like an endless...
I mean, it worked, but it was it was a chore.
I always wondered when I was going to tumble down all the stairs holding chairs, because I always figured coming back down with them, at some point I was going to, because I'm such a klutz. I am such a klutz, and I just waited. I was like, at some point I'm going to just go rolling down these stairs, and they're going to find me in the morning at the bottom of these stairs with all the broken chairs. It was fun. And you weren't there very long. We were talking, I feel like you were there forever. But you were only there 4.5 years.
4.5 years.
You said?
Yeah, and then we moved here and purchased our own business. So.
And I cried a lot when you left.
Oh,
I
is that
remember we did a goodbye. We had a goodbye party for you.
Well, that's right. And we went Kalamazoo.
We
Yeah,
did, and
yeah.
I cried a lot. I feel like because it was at the point I had been licensed, I think 2 years. About when you left, or 1.5 years. I had just gotten, I think, licensed-ish. And so I felt like, oh, we're in this groove, and here we go. And then you're like, oh, by the way, I'm leaving. And it was kind of like, what?
Yeah.
So it was like I was so excited to finally be licensed and doing, and then you left, and it was so sad. But this was a good opportunity for you guys. This is
I'd always had the ambition to own my own business.
Yeah.
And I was really beginning to like this work. I was in high school, but always as a thought, I'd like to have my own funeral home someday. It was never just work for somebody else. I really wanted my own business someday. And it was 40 years old before it happened, but it happened. So
That's people ask me a lot, do I want to own one? And I don't want, it's not ever been a dream of mine, I think, because it takes a lot, and it takes the right person to own a funeral home. It's not just owning any regular business.
Right.
There's such an influx with death, and having to balance costs and the functionality of a business dependent on how many calls you get and the ups and downs of everything. And it just seems like a Mother Nature stress that you have to be really efficiently balanced for, and I don't know that I am that kind of person.
yeah, I've always had that goal, but it's interesting, and I didn't really learn this till my dad passed away about 3 years ago, and I really never learned this till his later years and talking to him. But he was very much like me when he was in high school, wanting to own his own business someday. It was just a different kind of business. Actually, he always had a desire to own our farm implement business, and that's what he ended up going into. But I was the same way in high school. I really started having this desire that I thought, well, if I really, do go into this, I really would like to own my own business. I guess kind of an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And but I've enjoyed working for myself, and I'm so blessed that my wife works right alongside me. And
Yeah, you're such a perfect team that it's
and
worked well
and
for
our
you guys.
families, I think really like having both of us involved. Usually from the initial contact of the death through my wife doing aftercare with families and all the way through. And so, it's been a great career though. I always felt a calling to actually do this. So, but I have very fond memories of the 4.5 years where I was at the funeral home where we worked together. And
Well, I'm lucky that
it was a
I
great
think
experience.
it played out well for me that you were there during that time, because I think I learned that evenness from you, that even keeled and stuff. Going into sitting down, I had no idea what we were talking. I just didn't plan questions. I feel like I don't plan out a lot what we're talking. So some of these things that I'm kind of figuring out right now as we're talking, which is interesting. Some of that.
And there were some real tragedies I remember in the years. I won't go into detail, but you can probably remember there was particularly some tragedies that hit really home for us there at the funeral home.
We did. We lost some people around the funeral home, and a lot that happened. And I think that brings the staff together, and you get to know each other on a different level when you lose family members of employees or employees or a lot of sadness that happened. So, and my mom was there during time too.
That's right.
So, I mean, during this time while I was an apprentice, my mom was also working there. And so that was also a dynamic that I got to see my mom and her kind of be there, but it was her also needing to leave me alone to do my thing and kind of learn my own way without her
not overmothering
while she was there, which is hard to do. Now that I'm a mother, I'd be like, okay, do you need dinner? Are you okay? Do you need, and she really let me kind of just do my thing and learn my way and be an adult, which is hard for, letting your kids kind of go and do their thing. So, but that was another definite dynamic. That's when I got my Mini Winnie title, was I think during that time for the most part is when I started working with families and stuff more, because our personalities are very similar, Mom and I, and I can't remember who gave that to me, but I think one of the part-time guys started.
Mini Winnie, I do think I remember that now.
Yeah, I think one of the part-time guys started that, and I think just seeing us work very similar, and we don't look like each other at all, but.
Let me ask you, Kari, what's your favorite part of your work? Or do you like the variety? I mean, some people really enjoy the embalming and preparation and care of the deceased, and others particularly like working with families. Many people like a balance, which is actually what I like. I like both.
It does. It depends on the day. Some days I'm feeling very social, or I'm good. Some days I'm really not wanting to. We deal with our own stuff in our own personal lives, and it's hard some days if you're dealing with a lot to walk in and give your all to a family who, it's not like you're meeting with doing a tax audit or something. You're dealing with emotions, and it takes a lot of energy with some families, with a lot of families, to meet with them and to be that shoulder and that rock for that whole family, that sometimes if there's stuff going on personally, it's hard to do. So it's nice to some days just go to the prep room and take care of somebody and be a giver in that component, and to restore, to get to for somebody that's silent. And sometimes I just like that realm so much, because, and it just depends on how I'm feeling and what the day is. I really like the smaller funeral home where you do get to, like you said, work with a family through that whole. I love going to a family's home and bringing their loved one into the care of the funeral home and seeing their space, looking at pictures on the walls, talking to the family during that time, kind of just being in their world for just a moment before I bring them back, caring for them, then being with the family during arrangements and visitation and the funeral. And you establish this relationship that is kind of this forever connection, family, you than them, and maybe sometimes they do more for you in your life than you probably will ever do for them. But, that arc of the whole thing, I feel like that's like the golden moment when you get to be there through all of it with them.
Yeah, it's hit me in recent years. I think when you're younger and you're not as mature, you don't really think of it this way. But I've thought of it in really years. Really, I've been just really privileged to walk with so many families that for many of them, it's the worst time of their life. And gosh, that's just really a privilege to have been able to do that. And you just hope that you've made a difference in somebody's life. Yeah. I think that's part of what always drew me to this. I wanted to do something where I was making a difference in people's lives. Yeah. I could have gone into the farm equipment dealership work. My brother did, and he's great at it. That's so forth. That's just been great. I'm glad I didn't. I just never had any passion for it. I had great respect for that business, but I always wanted to do something, I think, where it was a little more personal, or I really felt like I was making a difference in people's lives. And hopefully we do. That's part of our philosophy here. Marcia and I hope we make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I think when you were talking about kind of the worst moments, families forcibly have to let us into a lot of privacy.
Yes, they do.
That they have. Sometimes we're walking into bedrooms, which are private rooms that people have. Sometimes into situations that morning they didn't know somebody was walking into their room. So there's dirty underwear, or there's, plates from the night before, or it is just a very unmasked situation, not by choice sometimes. And we are the people that are behind the scenes. We talk about finances. We talk about internal family conflict, relationship, secret lovers come out, and all these things that people might be embarrassed by and things, but we kind of have to be in on this with them. So it's like exposing someone's diary a lot of times. And
it's amazing how open a lot of people are with us, too.
Actually, sometimes I'm like, wow, you just shared that. Yeah. That was okay. We're there, I guess.
And occasionally there's the expression, too much information. But
we're good. We're good.
But it's really.
But it is. It's an honor
to
get
really
to
honor.
be
It's
that
just
person.
A privilege. Yeah, it really is. And even with some of the long hours and so forth, it's still worth it.
I always say there's kind of a give and take. For a day that maybe is over cumbersome and takes a lot of our time, we then have a slow day where we aren't there the whole day maybe, or close early, or get some more free time that we didn't realize we were going to get. So there is a give and take to it, and a lot of reward. I call it my selfish job, because I feel like I get sometimes more reward out of taking care of families and doing good things for them than anybody ever realizes.
Yeah.
The warm fuzzies, I call it.
Yeah.
I get so many warm fuzzies that
Yeah.
it keeps you going back the next day. It's kind of like a warm fuzzy junkie. Going back the next day.
Yeah.
But
there's nothing better than no matter how tired you might be, You know, there's nothing better than when you've gone through the, I'll call it funeral process with the family, and basically you get a hug and just thank you so much for everything you've
Yeah.
done. So you just have meant so much to us, and
Yep.
some of the beautiful thank you notes you get, and it does make it worth it.
It does. It does. Well, thank you for going back and
Sure,
sharing memories.
sure. I wished I had a little better memory. That's going back a ways.
Oh, it's many, many
Time flies.
thousands of bodies probably at this
time,
point.
Time flies.
It does. And I'm so glad we've stayed in touch. I mean, we may go months without speaking, but then we fall right back into the friendship I feel like we developed long ago when I was a youngin'. And
I always thought we worked together very well. You know,
We
some
did.
people you have better chemistry. I usually get along with most everybody, but some people you actually work with maybe a little better than
Yeah.
others. And thought we always had good chemistry as far as just working together.
yeah, I always felt like a daughter. Like I came in and was kind of like, it was like kind of daughter-ish age. I'm a little older than that, but
Yeah.
I don't know if logically you could truly be my dad age-wise.
Much
but-
younger sister.
Yes, we'll go with that one. That probably plays out better. So, well, thank you, Chris. Thank you guys for joining us and just doing a little rehash with me and my sponsor from way back in the day, 98, 99, 2000-ish. So that's a long time ago. I'm not that old, right? So thank you guys. I'll see you on the next video.
Thank you.